like to call here Gernot Deinzer for a talk entitled Cost for Research, How Cost Data of Research Can Be Included in Open Metadata to be Reused and Evaluated. Floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for giving me the possibility to talk about our project. I will talk about our project and the thoughts behind this project. It's all about costs, all about payments. Nobody wants to talk about it, but at least I think we have to talk about it. And where do we store this costs of publications, and why we have made this decision, and how we are reusing the data which we really make transparent in this kind of stage. So I'm talking about a DFG-funded project in Germany which is called Open Cost. So actually at this time we just ended with the first phase, and luckily we have granted a second phase. So in the first phase we really had the goals to create a technical infrastructure that allows to publish in a transparent way costs of publications, and we've generated a standard for this transfer of cost data, and I think our goal is really to establish a transparency about paying for open access publications. Actually, in the first phase, we had to focus on 3 points. The first point was to develop a standard for publication fees. The second point was to really make a technical implementation to provide this data and to harvest this data, to enable a harvesting of this data. And the last point, or the last goal, was really to reuse this data in one specific case, and this case was in the electronic journal library to display payments of institutions. So why I'm here today? Because what we are thinking is that cost data play an important role, and if we are looking at metadata of publications, we clearly see that we are talking about metadata, and we have in mind something like bibliographic metadata, which we have heard a lot of talking today, yesterday, and so on. So that's a normal kind when we are talking about metadata, but if we are looking in detail, we are talking about, for example, technical metadata like the format of the files, the file size. We are talking about legal metadata, which is, for example, the license applied or the rights transferred. We are talking maybe about metadata which describes the content, if we are using chats file or so on. But what we are missing in my point of view, or in the point of view of our project, is that we should add to this all this metadata when we are paying for articles. So we started with articles, and we decided to generate a description about metadata related to costs. So if we are looking, we would just add a new kind of metadata, the cost data, which includes maybe the invoice number, the amount paid, the type which are paying for, maybe for APC, maybe for collar charges, etc., the payment, the invoice, or if it's part of an agreement, a contract, and so on. We decided to make this standard as a standard which can stand alone, so you can use it and you can connect it with the other metadata by the DOI, or you can also include it in other metadata formats, for example in DataCite. So we are talking with DataCite if they are interested in including cost data in their DataCite schema. So the first we started is really to develop a schema for cost payments in articles. So we didn't do it ourselves. We started with a workshop with international experts from paying APCs. It started 3 years ago, and we started an online discussion at GitHub, and so we get a lot of response from the community. So what we arrived is really a metadata standard for paying APCs, and this we wrote down in a standard way with an XML representation and a JSON representation. So it was important for us. We started with the XML representation because we want to use the OAI PMH interface to provide this information, but we have seen very fast that the young generation wants JSON. If we are talking about paying for articles, the first things first was APCs. The second thing, nowadays, we are getting more and more in this transformative movement, so we have a lot of transformative agreements, and we want to have this transformative agreements also in our metadata scheme, because if we are looking to publications, we don't know if a publication was published within a transformative agreement. I've just put it in two examples. So one example is the Scope 3 consortium. If you're looking at a publication, it's mentioned in the copyright where that it is published within the Scope 3 consortia. If we are looking at these big transformative agreements in Germany, they are mentioned in the acknowledgement. I don't know if it's the right place, but it's mentioned there. And in other transformative agreements, it's not mentioned in the text at all. So it was the second thing, that we have something in our metadata of the publication which refers to a transformative agreement. We added in our repositories a new entity called contract or agreement. Actually, nowadays we regret a little bit to call it contract. And we just make a relation from the article to this entity, which is contract. This is nothing new. You can do it with project and so on. We just enlarged it to a contract and agreement. You can do this with contracts, with transformative agreement, with community models like Scope 3, with memberships like Open Library of Humanities or CIPOS, or even for infrastructures like Directory of Open Access, we applied it. And also for this entity, we have an XML and a JSON representation, even to provide this data via an API or a COI interface. Why did we choose a repository to present this data? If you're looking at repositories, the first thing, we are talking about gold open access, paying for an article by a publisher. But I think if we are paying for an article, at least we should keep a copy of the article at our repository. So the parallel deposit of an article from a gold, from a payment, should be always in our repository, because we have paid for it and we can really guarantee the long time availability of this article if it's in our repository. Further on in repositories, we have heard we can really enlarge our metadata from open sources, from closed sources, from open sources like DataCite, like OpenAlex, Crossref, and so on. And we can enrich the data also with local metadata like the institutions of a university, like the chairs, local identifier, and so on. We have a lot of value there. And further on, in repositories, normally we also have the funding of the project in which the publication was generated. And if we are thinking further, I think that's the first thing that we are mentioned, the project and the funders is the first thing that we are mentioned first, who was paying for publication. And this we are just enlarging by the payment itself. When we are looking in repositories, we just see that we are missing something at repositories in our metadata of repositories. It's a payment, as I mentioned before, but it may be also something like the reason why something is open access. Even this we have added to our repositories, so maybe we have paid for it, so that's the reason why it's open access, or because it's of copyright law sometimes, or it's just because it's a policy of the publisher and so on. What we also have added, I have mentioned already, is if it's part of a contract, and even what we can do if we invest for an infrastructure or we have any personnel we have engaged in this. We have already thought about including it in library systems, but library systems are closed systems. They are not very easy to enlarge with metadata and so on. So they are really closed, and they don't have really good interfaces to connect with other systems. So actually we have really decided to implement everything in repositories, in our 3 repositories at the University of Regensburg, at the University of Bielefeld, and the DC in Hamburg. Thank you. So that we have really the first case where we publish this data and where we really make it visible and openly reusable. And there we have really all these advantages of repositories to be interoperable and so on. But in principle, you can also add this information in CRIS systems as well. So I just want to show you the first results of our project. The first results is how we have implemented the open cost data or the cost data in our repositories. So if you look at the left, you see the, I think left is DESI, in the center is from the University of Regensburg, and right is the Bielefeld institutional repository, and you will see that there is always the information in a human readable way, how much is paid for a publication and even who has paid for a publication. So we have added the payments from our institutions, and if we know it from other institutions as well. This was the human readable way, but we also implemented the machine readable way, and you see the OAI PMH interface for cost data. So this is the standard we developed, and we really provide this data, and everyone who wants to know how much we are paying for an article can come and can read this and to reuse it how it likes to be reused. We are sharing this data. We really want to have transparency about cost data. So it can be harvested from our repositories and it can be reused in any other systems. So if we are looking at the systems where it is reused, nowadays it's the OpenAPC. If you're looking at the OpenAPC, it's really that a lot of institutions are participating in OpenAPC. So there are about 122 institutions in Germany and a lot of institutions, over 400 in Europe, and some institutions from North America, Africa and Asia as well. So what we see here is really that institutions are willing to share this data and to make it publicly available and reusable. What we are doing nowadays, what is the first is done, our 3 institutions are harvested by the OpenAPC initiative. All other institutions are still sending the data manually at Bielefeld, at the University of Bielefeld, where OpenAPC is situated. And so it's a lot of work to do, but we want to automate it. If you are looking at OpenAPC, you see this in a delay of the numbers provided. So if you're looking now, you won't find any numbers of 2025, any payments, but a lot of 2023, so there's a lack of a time problem. On the other hand, we are reusing the data, for example, in the electronic journal library. If you're going to the electronic journal library, you have a few of your institution, like here at the University Library from Regensburg, and we see how much we are spending in the average for articles. Here it's this example, it's +1. And we see that the average we are spending for +1 article is higher than the average someone is spending at the world average. So we are asking why, and maybe we should go to the publisher and ask why is it expensiver for us than for others. So the conclusion is where we have arrived is that we have a standardized way to transfer cost metadata. We made it available in a human readable way for everyone who's coming to us, and we have made it available in a machine readable way. And I think we are really on this way that we are fulfilling for our payments, which are our data, the really fair principles. And I think that's important for us. We are talking about it. So I just want to thank all the project team. And if you are interested in this, you see all the links to our project pages. Thank you very much.
Questions from the audience?
Thank you for this remarkable presentation and work. But then I have a political question. What about Diamond OA articles? Are they within the system? Because the problem of focusing for good reasons on APC data, then once again it legitimizes this way of doing things rather than other ways to publish open access. Thank you.
Thank you for this question. I missed this part because I think this is very, very important for Diamond Open Access, because if we are talking about Diamond Open Access, we have to compare costs from commercial open access and Diamond Open Access. You can include all these costs in Diamond models like we have in SciPost. If we are submitting money to SciPost, we can include this, and we can really, like I say, make the relation between a publication in our institution with SciPost. So it's a little bit helps us to engage our scientists to publish in SciPost, and also to have really a reason to explain why we are paying for SciPost, because we know what is published there. On the other hand, our metadata scheme is flexible. So what we are now talked about is the first thing APC, the second thing contracts, and in contracts you can include all this diamond thing. So you can also think about, if you are running a diamond journal, you can include the costs like for persons and so on, really in this model, and then you have what we have now is payments and so on, and you can also make this controlled vocabulary, which is in the back. You can also add it with persons, with anything you're spending, with technical running achievement and so on. So we are open to diamond. We think it's a really big thing because we have to compare. If we are talking about diamond, we always forget that diamond costs money, and we really are keen on including diamond here, and that's in our project phase, one of our really points we are looking at.
Thanks for the talk and thanks for the work. It's a really valuable piece that we in part have been building on in work at Koki and also with IOI. So thank you for that. I'm kind of asking the same question but at a technical level. And what struck me was when you mentioned OLH, Open Library of Humanities, as an example, where the articles that your university publishes are not really what you're paying for in an OLH submission, or indeed in other diamond cases. So can you just unpack a little bit the extent to which you're modelling the existence of the contracts? Do the contracts themselves have an ID, or is it implicit through relations with articles? And how are you thinking, what's your thinking about how you handle these situations where you want to track exactly what you just said? You want to track the value you are getting from Open Library of Humanities by knowing that these articles are related to this payment, but that's not actually what the payment's for. It just, yeah, we grappled with this, and I'm just really interested to hear you unpack that a little further.
Okay, that's why we made this, we talked a lot with persons about how to make this contract visible. First of all, I think the idea was that when we are paying for a contract, we talked about transformative agreements, we talked about just dividing the number we are paying by the number of articles and put them in the articles. But we decided not to do so, because we decided to make this entity contract because we want to make the evaluation possible for everyone who is using the data, not just for us. If we want to use the data to say one publication costs more or less this money, one can do this. But often it doesn't make sense. If we are, for example, we are a member of the, or we are supporting the OLH, and we really want to support it even if we don't have publications, because we support it. It's one of the oldest business models of Diamond Open Access. And I think it's such a strong commitment to open access to support it, so we never would relate it to publications. But if we are going on and we're getting more and more models, we always have to justify something. But we don't want to justify the cost of publication, and that's why we have generated this entity contract. And in the second phase, we are thinking about all these IDs for contracts. If we are talking about transformative agreements, it's very easy. We can use the ESAC ID, with all the advantages, but with some disadvantages, which is reusable in a machinable way. And we are thinking about a registry of all these contracts we are using and which are existing, but that's what we are doing in the next time, in the next 3 years, more or less. But I can just invite you to start with other communications. We will have a workshop next year in Hamburg. You can join it if you want. You just have to write us an email and we will invite you. We have online discussions on GitHub and so on. Just join us, because we are just 3 partners and you are all interested in it, and we don't know everything.
Thank you very much for the presentation and the project. I have a question, because in Germany, do you use a lot the PAR fee for the PAR, yeah, the PAR fee? So how you put that as the cost for publishing and the cost for reading? Are you using, or you just put the PAR fee in the publication?
We don't put in the PAR fee. So we have this PAR fee, which is for one publisher, it's one par fee for all publications. It's the same for another publisher. We have this tier model with 3 par fees for different journals. What you have, we don't put the par fee in, we put just the amount we are paying for the whole contract. We can put in the first contract, which is the first payment in the year we are paying for the publications, and the year afterwards when there is the calculations about the publication. So we have 2 payments which we can put into the contract. And also we have something like an invoice group, which is called, where we can specify tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and so we can make the relation.
Okay, if there are more questions, I ask you to engage with Gernot during the break. Thank you so much. And the next speaker is Zoe Wake-Hyde, who is having a talk entitled What's in a Book? A review of book-related work types in various metadata schemas, and an attempt to align these in OMP and Thoth open metadata.
Thank you. Hi everyone. So I'm here to talk about books, which don't get a lot of love in these spaces, but is really the focus of my work with PKP and beyond. And you'll see here, I started out calling this presentation, What's in a Book? The real question that we're dealing with here is, what is a book? And that is a question that has kept me up at night and made me great fun at parties. But to start with the very small piece of work that inspired some more broad investigation, go in the right direction. So I joined PKP last year to work specifically on Open Monograph Press, OMP, and that is the book sibling to OJS, Open Journal Systems. OMP was released in 2012, and it has benefited from a lot of the investment and a lot of the progress that's been made by PKP on OJS, but it has also suffered from OJS's success and it taking up a lot of air in the room, a lot of resources. And so my joining the team was really a moment to give it some attention through the lens of how do we make this part of PKP's purpose towards making research a public good and supporting research as a public good, because there's a substantial amount of research that is published in places other than journals that is part of the scholarly record that we're all invested in maintaining and improving over time. And so for that review, I undertook user research with OMP users and did some landscape analysis. And so I can frame a little bit the evolution of open book publishing since OMP launched in 2012. And then through this process, there was a really key finding for OMP, which is that we're looking at users using it for much more than just books. And I'll get to that more, but it happened to coincide with a collaboration we have with Thoth Open Metadata, who are absolutely leading the way in open book metadata. I'm a huge fan of the work that they do, and they had been developing a plugin for OMP that I'll talk more about, and that kind of brought us to this place to consider what is a book and how do we talk about books, how do we register books in the various places we want them to be showing up. So a quick overview of trends in open book publishing and why it's changed so much. So as most presses that existed previously have moved towards hybrid models, there are a lot of new open access presses which are doing fantastic things. There's also been really big growth in institutional publishing, and that has involved books as well. A big piece there is open textbooks. I'm based in Canada, and so in the North American context, most institutional library publishing programs who are publishing books are publishing textbooks. And so that adds a layer to the kind of landscape that wasn't as prevalent 10, 20 years ago. And through that, we've also found that there are spaces we're moving towards more expansive definitions of scholarship. I come mostly from the humanities and social sciences. Digital humanities has been a really big area of growth. And so what we're thinking of as scholarship no longer looks just like the monograph, the nice, pretty printed book that you get to hold in your hands and say, yay, I did it. And then trends in digital publishing platforms have also enabled more and different kinds of publishing to happen as well. That all lives under this heading of open book publishing. Too far, okay. So coming back to the review, one of the most substantial findings is that OMP users are using it to publish a really wide range of content beyond monographs and edited volumes, which are the two types of books that it was originally intended to support. So it was designed initially in partnership with Athabasca University Press, who were one of the very first open access presses, and a lot of that legacy is still there, where we see that users are having to work around decisions that were made to make it work for them, but they really want it to work for them, and they've put the time in to be able to publish more than monographs and edited volumes. In the platform itself, one of the major challenges is that at the point of submission, you have to choose between this binary, these two options, and it doesn't have a huge effect on what comes next. The biggest difference is that in edited volume, it sets you up to have different authors for each chapter within a book, whereas in a monograph, it's the same author or authors for the whole book. Beyond that, we're not doing a lot with it. And so it's been a clear request from the user community to move away from the use of monograph, and there are some where that is a really hard barrier for using the submission form, because presenting their authors with a choice that doesn't apply to them creates too much confusion to really make it practical. So I'm going to quickly show a couple of the very prolific users of OMP to give you a sense of what I'm talking about here when I say lots of different kinds of content. So Erlangen University Press is in Indonesia. They have over 1,000 publications on their OMP site, and you can see here that includes textbooks, reference texts, scientific monographs, anthologies, pocketbooks, poetry, novels, comics, and proceedings. And it's a really, really cool project that they have going, where they're encouraging and supporting a really diverse range of publishing from their institution. Another example, again, prolific, we're talking nearly 2,000 published works on their OMP, is CODESRIA, so the Council for Development of Social Science Research in Africa. They are based in Senegal, but work across the continent. And they have books, and in their language, they have just a group called books, and then also theses, dissertations, working papers, policy briefs, textbooks, and series. And so that across a set of almost 2,000 publications, you can see that there's really substantial groupings of content within a system that was supposed to be just for books, in a way. So, Thoth Open Metadata. I missed the open in the title. I'm very sorry, Rupert. So, as I said, we've been collaborating, and this has really been driven by Thoth, and PKP is really grateful for the work that they put into this. So they've been working on a plugin to connect the systems so that works that are created in OMP can be moved across to Thoth and benefit from the services that they've been developing. And so they have their own list of work types, essentially. So in OMP, we have 2 submission types. Thoth supports book chapters, monographs, edited books, textbooks, journal issues, and book sets. And soon, or maybe already, but soon at least, reports, theses, and conference proceedings will be added. And so when you're trying to integrate 2 systems that have such a different way of categorizing works, and it's a high priority on the Thoth side for it to be categorized in such a way, it's one of the few required metadata elements, we have too much of a mismatch, and so we came together to try and figure it out and see what we decided to look into how other people were handling this, because it's not a problem that's isolated to our 2 systems or our attempt to integrate them. And so I set out to do some evaluation of a few different approaches to categorizing books by work type. I won't run through all of the ones that I looked at, but I picked out a few examples that I think really illustrate it. So starting with MARC records, you have a type of record called a book, and within that you choose the nature of the content, and you see the list here. There is an awful lot here under the heading of book, and there are strong cases to be made for some of this not belonging there. I think theses, oh, thank you. Okay. Theses are an interesting example because it's a very common pattern to go from thesis to book publishing, and so calling it a book too soon is a challenge for folks who are trying to take that path. Looking at Dublin Core, on the other hand, they refer you to the DCMI type vocabulary, and there is text. Text, that's it. And everything that has words goes into text. Then looking at Onyx, Onyx is really prevalent in book spaces, but it is so trade focused. It's almost impossible to categorize anything. I pulled out, they have the most comprehensive list of thesis types, very clearly not applicable in all scenarios. Then looking at Crossref, we come across something which I think is a key challenge here, which is that the book site table represents books and all other containers. The naming is an accident of history. It contains much more than books. And it really does. There's a good list there. And then in the book type list, you have a much shorter list. But I appreciate that they do name that the book site table really is everything that isn't a journal, because all of that's in the journal site table. Looking to data site, everything lives within the resource type general. There are a few relevant fields here I pulled out that you could make an argument for certain texts, but it also points you back to that Dublin Core mapping for work types. And then I found the work done by Core on the controlled vocabularies for repositories really interesting. And what I've highlighted here is the different spots where there are additional options under each of these resource types text. And I think it's remarkable that book has book part, and yet we have 9 options for report, we have 8 options for journals, we have 3 options for reviews, we have 7 options for conference outputs, and there's 1 for book, and it's a book part. So again, you're kind of seeing that there's an unequal distribution in terms of detail. So looking across all of this work, the really clear answer is there's no widely adopted controlled vocabulary for describing work types. And in the context of OMP, we don't have good language to put to the work that our users are doing. And the bigger picture there is that the book category is either vastly too narrow or vastly too broad. We're using that word without really having good definitions for it. And so the questions coming out of this, which we hope to continue addressing, are whether we should be looking at developing more granularity within those book types, and whether we should have better umbrella terms for non-serial publications. For this, everything but journals, right? And it's a funny thing of language, and if you're familiar with fruit versus vegetable, vegetable just means everything that's edible that isn't a fruit, right? And so we're in that scenario here where books are the vegetable. It's everything that isn't a journal, and that's really limiting in terms of allowing us to get detailed, get really into what's possible and what's necessary when supporting better book metadata. That's a mouthful. So at OMP, we're going to continue to take this into consideration, keep working with Thoth, but there's really a question here of what happens next, where this can go, where it needs to be picked up, and so I'm here, in a way, advocating for an evolution which I know has happened within these spaces. Going from journals to journals and books, and I'm really encouraging us to go to journals and books and filling in that blank afterwards, because there's a lot more here. Thank you. Sorry, that was way over.
Questions from the audience? So I will start. I have plenty. I have to confess.
Great, excellent.
So a few things that are just a curiosity, since you are working with the Open Monograph Press. Do you have data statistics about how much it is used worldwide? So how many instances are there, and how many publications are handled by means of these instances?
Yeah, so with PKP, of course, we have the beacon data available, and so I've not worked with the most recent set of that yet, but the previous version, from that we identified that there were around 420 OMP instances that were reporting via beacon. I'm not a data analyst. I haven't gone into every single thing available there. From the number of records, you can get a sense of the number of publications, but there's nothing's returned in the beacon data to say this many publications are public. That said, I looked across examples. Some would have less than 10, and then you saw others are upwards of 2,000. They get really big, and so there's a huge range. So it's hard to even give an average. I think it would probably work out to be 150, but in a way that doesn't mean anything because it is such a wide range.
Questions from the audience?
So thank you for doing that and books too. Talk, because Rupert must have been too tired for that this time. So you've got a technical problem and a social problem, and the social problem is hard. It's one of categorization. So yes, good luck.
Thanks. We need it.
Can the technical problem be separated out somewhat in the sense of, I guess, try to draw a line from Catherine's talk and Claudio's question, as we think about a new generation of architectural principles. And so in an ideal world, you go back, redo OMP so that it was a modular decision, and you could drop in whatever vocabulary you liked and everything would be beautiful.
Right.
And I guess I'm really just, is that, do we have to, can we do both in parallel, I guess, is the question I'm really asking.
In a way, we have to. There's an immediate problem that needs a solution from the technical perspective with what we're trying to do, and to be practical about supporting the existing OMP users. That's one of the options on the table, is that we allow people to create and manage their own taxonomies, or we remove it entirely, because what it's doing operationally in the system is deciding about chapter authors and things like that. So we're always going to have to do both. I hope that thinking about it as both of these problems and how intertwined they are, and that the decisions that are made at the technical level are going to influence the culture, right? Which is why I'm very vocal talking about we're not there yet with our language, because that's true of the standards that we're looking at, but it's also in the conversations we have. And I think it contributes to the kind of gulf between journals and other that we deal with when we have more in common, and a better understanding of book publishing and books and plus whatever that is. Publishing, I think, takes some of the fear away as well. Like, I run into a lot of people who are just so overwhelmed by the idea of book publishing that it gets in the way of engaging with it. And so getting rid of some of the ambiguity in our language might help with that too.
Okay. Thank you, Zoe.
Thank you.